Welcome to the Feehery podcast, brought to you by EFB Advocacy. EFB means excellent for business. I'm joined by my colleagues John Easton and Adam Belmar. John is the former Chief of Staff to Senators Kelley and Gordon Smith, and is known in Washington as a most excellent campaign and legislative strategist. Adam is a recovering journalist and television producer. He worked for George W. Bush and is known for his prowess as a visual storyteller. And I'm your host, John Feehery. We are broadcasting live from EFB Worldwide Headquarters, a block away from the iconic and historic Eastern Market on Capitol Hill. And we are delighted that you joined us today and tuned in. Theory 1, Kelley's hero. John Kelley, the former general and the current chief of staff in the White House, came to the briefing room and knocked it out of the park. He basically told the media that they needed better sources, that he wasn't unhappy in his job, and that he wasn't going to be fired anytime soon. My theory, General Kelley is no Alexander Haig. He is large and in charge, and the country should feel better knowing that he is controlling the paper flow to this president. Adam Belmar, you saw the general's briefing. What are your thoughts?
Well, it was a surprise appearance. The press secretary took to the podium, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and she had a little surprise up her sleeve. No one was expecting the chief. It's a bit of a rarity not to have the chief of staff out, but at the podium, and especially for this chief of staff, who has kept a very low profile and was actually quite humble in what he felt he still wasn't really on top of. But he did frame, as you pointed out, John, the context of his presence in terms of, I'm not quitting, I'm not getting fired, and I have no intention of voting someone off the island on Friday. So we'll wait and see if that bodes for anyone's longer-term service at the White House. But I felt like having General Kelley out there was a really wise and advantageous thing for this White House. It helps to settle things down, and I think it helped to put the romper room in on warning a little bit. He told them point blank, John Feehery, that they needed to get better sources. And the thing he also told them, which I felt was very frank, was that when you see pictures of me with my head in my hands, I am thinking. He is a contemplative human who is not upset and angry and horrified by the president during speeches, but rather thinking, he says, and that people should not make assumptions about the look on his face. There are a lot of political ramifications here, but this was a very wise move for the White House.
So, John Easton, you spent many years as a chief of staff, and now with the chief of staff in the White House is different than the chief of staff to a senator, but same leadership role. You're serving as a principal, and that's not an easy job because you want to make sure that you're doing all you can to keep the flow of information to the boss, but also that you're making the boss happy, but also that the boss doesn't do stupid things. Not that your members would ever do that. So what are your thoughts about General Kelley?
Well, first, I can't imagine being chief of staff to this president, and I'm glad as chief of staff I never had to go in front of the world to give a briefing. But I think what fascinated me yesterday, because I was actually had the briefing on in the background, like a lot of us do, just consuming this kind of news, and I was surprised. I was pleasantly surprised. But I think what has fascinated me more about this than the actual briefing itself yesterday, which he did a good job. I don't think he made a lot of news, but he did a good job. Was what was the conversation like between the president and John Kelley about doing this briefing?
Do you think that it was the president who said, we got to get you out there? Or do you think General Kelley said, you know what, I think this is the right time for me to get out there?
You know, I just think however the conversation went, whether whoever drove this idea, matters less than the fact that the president was willing to have this done. Because we all know the president doesn't like others getting more credit or more praise than himself. He's a guy all about entertainment, all about TV. So to say, yep, go on out there and do it, probably full well knowing, as you said, the guy's a hero. The guy really is has such stature. John Kelley does with this White House, and friends of ours who work in the White House say as much, that he really has had an organizing, calming effect on the West Wing. So I think what he went out and did, this was the right call, in part because he was able to say, this is a structure that that is organized, and I'm in charge of the staff. I'm not in charge of the boss, but I'm in charge of the staff. And to Adam's point, I do think it has calmed some roiling waters of North Korea, the Iran deal, even this personal down in the mud flap with Senator Bob Corker of Tennessee. I just think all of that, they were able to put it down.
So let's talk a little bit about Bob Corker, but I also want to say about John Kelley is he has a lot of self-confidence. He's a confident man, and when he walks up before that podium, he knows what he's talking about, and he knows exactly what he wants to say, and he doesn't really go off script per se, but he doesn't need a script because he knows.
And he didn't have one yesterday. He had a few ideas.
He knew exactly what he wanted to say, and that self-confidence is so inspiring for people who are wondering about this White House. And I want to go back to the Bob Corker thing, but I also want to talk a little bit about this idea that maybe the White House is trying to promote this idea of Donald Trump out of control, the madman theory, the idea that you need to be able to cut a deal with this guy because we don't know what he's going to do. Because there's so many.
There's precedent for this.
Lots of precedent.
There's precedent, and there's also a lot of blind quotes from staff that sometimes I think we're all getting set up here.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I would say that General Kelley did well yesterday was he sort of nullified this proposition that he was somehow brought in to manage the president in his tweeting. And he clearly said, I am not. You can't gauge me on what the president's doing. That's not for me to say. What he talked about was the structure that you talked about, the information flow, what I was privy to, and I wasn't at that highest level in briefings with the President of the United States in the Oval Office, but when you're in the White House senior staff, you realize the role of staff secretary, the chief's office, and the flow in and out of the president is meant to be productive, and meant to give him value and bring in people that are going to offer the policy suggestions that are going to help him make decisions. That's what the general is doing. That's what a chief should do. And we should all rest a little assured that you've heard his voice. You know he's from Massachusetts. He sounds like a God-fearing American who made one last point. The best job he ever had.
And I think
was as a Marine.
the press in that room, in the White House briefing room, they respect him almost universally. Right. I think there's no question.
I think that's right.
And that helped him yesterday. It helps him in his job in general.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about tweeting because we're going to talk about how General Kelley said, that's not my portfolio. I don't oversee the tweeting. Now, we do know that he loves to tweet this president. We know that he loves to tweet against people that he deems as being enemies. And we know that sometimes members of the Senate, like Bob Corker, are going to respond in kind. I don't know if this really helps Bob Corker, to kind of talk about the fact that, this is an adult daycare and kind of promote this idea of
Kelley said that he had spoken to Corker in that press conference. Yeah. That was one of the things he said. Asked and answered. I've had a chance to talk to Corker since those comments.
And you need Corker for a bunch of different things, John. What are your thoughts on how we handle how do you have the Senate?
I think that my thoughts are in my reaction to this whole Bob Corker, President Trump flap that just started to degrade and go into the mud. It was you just don't want to get off substance with this president if you are offering a critique. Because when you offer a critique and it gets personal, Donald Trump will out-personal you to the ground. So keep it substance-driven. And I think that President Trump will respond a lot better that way. And let's face it, I think we've got more of this coming. I think more senators will speak out. I don't think they're necessarily afraid of him, but they should be afraid to speak out in personal terms because this is where Donald Trump will go every single time. We've seen it all the way back to the 2016 presidential primary.
He fights fire with overwhelming fire in ways that is unprecedented in politics. But it is very fitting for a reality show president. I mean, if you look at any kind of reality show where they just cut you to pieces and people cheer about that, I mean, that's kind of what's been happening here.
Right.
And I think that Trump is kind of more in touch with how people are out there talking than most politicians.
What do you guys make of the narrative that Corker first said he wasn't going to run for your election and then he started to square off against the president? Is it just being unencumbered by the burden of re-election that makes a political leader able to finally tell the truth, or was there something greater going on and Corker needed to do this, break with him on the personal level, but there's a lot of other foreign relations stuff that's going on in heavy weighing on heavily on the minds of folks right now.
Well, I think Corker, first of all, last week he said he's not sure if he wanted to vote for the tax cut. And then he said he wasn't going to run again. And so he's unburdened by having to face the voters, which I think is, unfortunate, because if you face the voters, then you have to be more careful in what you say. And now he's a completely independent actor. And is he going to represent the constituents, or is he going to represent his own personal thoughts? And I think that's troubling, actually.
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit of both. I think that he is unencumbered a bit. But I do think that that for somebody of his stature to directly critique the president like that, he's chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, and there are so many hot topics going on right now on the world stage that this was. It was a shot. Now, Bob Corker, those of you who've watched him over the years know that he's a pretty independent guy to begin with.
Right.
I think he's really frustrated. So to be a little more unencumbered by re-election, just almost guaranteed he was going to go out and say something.
Right, exactly. We're going to go to the next theory. Theory 2, repealing Obama. Elections have consequences. When Barack Obama was president, he sought to change America using the power of his pen and the power of his telephone. But after 10 months in the White House, it is clear that there is a new sheriff in town. President Trump is walking away from all of the major legacy items of his predecessor. From the Iran deal to DACA, from ACA subsidies to the Paris Treaty, the new president is repealing Obama, not just Obamacare. My theory, President Obama's legacy was built on faulty logic and shaky constitutional footing. President Trump will get grief from the media, but not from the bulk of the American people, especially his political base. John Easton, what say you about repealing Obama?
I do agree with your theory that this is a driving force of not just this president, but a lot of the people who he has hired to serve with them in this administration and in the West Wing of the White House. I think there is a fervor to try to unearth, undo, and put Barack Obama's policies into the grave. I do disagree with the approach, though. I like, if something's unconstitutional and they want to challenge it on those grounds, I think that's fine. The problem is that this is part of the dysfunction of Congress, and when you have a dysfunctional Congress that doesn't seem to get anything done, and this is back with Barack Obama's days as well, is that you have an administration, a president who is going to do many things by executive order. So then if the party changes in the White House, we're just going to go undo all those executive orders. So my feeling is the more that Congress can do and legislatively, the more these things are going to hold up.
Yeah.
We don't want to go back and forth each time a party changes in the White House. We're just going to go back and undo. We need to look forward, and the best way we can look forward and actually push policies forward is by Congress to do its job.
That's kind of my point, in that the ACA subsidies, which are now
We're talking specifically about the subsidies in the insurance markets for insurers.
right, and as part of Obamacare, the president makes the point that they're not constitutional because they were never authorized by Congress, and they're, as part of the law, they're not appropriated by Congress, and Congress has to do that. I think that is actually a pretty well thought out position that the president is taking. He's getting hammered for undermining Obamacare, but that was the shaky ground that Obamacare was built on. You talk about the Iran deal, Adam. That was never a treaty. That was never a treaty. It never went to Congress. They voted on something, but it was not a treaty. The same thing with the Paris Climate Accord, not a treaty. And you talk about DACA, an executive order, he should have done law. The president built up all these legacy items, President Obama, that were always going to be shaky, always easily repealed. And I think that's the reason why his legacy is going to be easily repealed by President Trump.
Well, certainly President Trump is doing what he said he would do. This shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody, especially Democrats, and that there is a constitutional and legal justification bolstered by the Justice Department and HHS with regard to the subsidies. I think what regular Americans, everyday folk who are out there and not following politics every day, should hopefully understand is that the markets price things in. There are people who are watching and knowing what to expect, and premiums for the coming year are already going to be up. People have priced this into the market. They saw this coming. And so while we talk about this big change that's going to come, that we were already headed there. This is not really anything new. It's just the president taking action. And as he said on Sean Hannity's show the other night, why didn't I do it earlier? Well, I was really hoping that we were going to get Congress to be able to affect these things in a permanent way. And realizing that that didn't come to fruition, he's now taking the executive action route on this one. So, I think the president's on good ground here politically, constitutionally, and I think he really needs to do a good job in explaining all of this and what he hopes for the future and painting a picture of what things should look like and not just batting down the Obama legacy.
John Easton, it seems to me that and a couple of these things, especially when we're talking about Obamacare and talking about DACA, the president is lighting a fire under Congress to get its act together and do something. The question is, will Congress get its act together and do something? And I think that if you think about DACA, for example, with the Dreamers, he gave it a 6-month deadline. He said he's open to extending that deadline if he has to. And then the White House put all kinds of very tough negotiating points drafted by Stephen Miller that the Democrats don't know how to handle. Do you think that they're going to get deals on these things?
Well, I think back to your point about the executive, really governing by executive order. I truly believe that if President Trump doesn't want to become President Obama in terms of having all of his policies undone, he's got to work with Congress to get it legislatively, ground in and done. Because look how hard it is to repeal Obamacare. It's because this thing was done in House, Senate, signed by the president. So what he's doing on the Affordable Care Act, it's still tinkering around the edges. I know it's a big deal, but it's still that it's going to have, lasting effects. We'll see. Now, if they start to attack this legislatively, it looks like they're going to have to do it bit by bit. Then it will have, the power of policy.
Adam, you've been talking offline about the Iran deal. What do you think is going to happen with what's happening with Iran?
Well, I think for many of us who aren't steeped in foreign policy or this deal, the idea that we are keeping the Iranian nuclear program in a box, and that we've heard from many other foreign leaders, including our own Secretary of State and others, who say that this is working. And General Kelley reiterated it a bit yesterday, and then tangentially also with what we're dealing with North Korea. When the president decertifies today, what he's saying is that we want to snap back the sanctions. We want to start renegotiating, right? This is the president's big mantra. It was a bad deal. We've got to renegotiate. I think that we have reason to be worried here. The Iranian state is diametrically opposed to the existence of Israel. They are a huge player in the war on terror, supporting Hezbollah, ISIS. There are a lot of things for us to be worried about, but a nuclear Iran is anathema to our security, and I think that the president has got to be careful. He's playing with things that are very, very tricky, and I think he might, if he doesn't explain this very well today, make some people very happy, but on the world stage, he's going to put our credibility in jeopardy.
Well,
and that worries me.
But that also goes to the reason why President Obama cut this deal with the Iranians is that there was a lot of pressure from the Europeans and other countries outside of Israel that wanted, because they wanted to do business with Iran. Iran's a big country.
There's some big American companies that are doing
There's a lot of American companies that have for a long time. And so this is a lot more complicated than people think. I think you're right that the president has to be careful on this. I'm glad that General Mattis and Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and John Kelley are the triumvirate who are kind of keeping this thing all in line.
And McMaster, too.
And McMaster. These guys kind of know they're adults. They understand this. They also understand that there's implications for what happens in North Korea.
Yeah.
And this goes back to my Mad Men theory.
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
That I think that sometimes they're playing it pretty well, and they're not going to get credit for it. But I think if I were Kim Jong Un, I'd be a little bit concerned about this. But they need to play this Iran thing very, very carefully.
Yeah, and I think there is precedent to this madman theory. I think going back to Eisenhower with nukes, you never knew whether you wanted to use them or not. I don't think he did, but he always would say, "Give me a tactical nuclear weapons option on this," and he knew that would leak out to the rest of the world, and they were really taken back by this. I mean, this is the great General Eisenhower we're talking about here, to Reagan, who would also, people thought he was half out of his rocker, and now we've got, and even George W. Bush to an extent, not nearly like this. So I'll say this: I hope it's a madman theory. I hope that is the case, because
I hope he's not really a madman.
I hope he's not crazy, but because he acts like it.
The interesting thing about this is one of the stories that leaked out is that Trump wanted 10 times more nuclear weapons. He wants to, and this is all part of what Rex Tillerson was talking about theoretically, about the president having, not having the
You're
IQ.
dancing around it.
Yeah, when he theoretically called him a moron. We're not sure if he did or not. But this is the thing: is the president wants more nuclear weapons, and that's actually pretty expensive. And a lot of the military says, "Hey, we've got the military that we need. We don't need to rely on nuclear weapons."
Look, no one's in the room. Nobody knows, but the president has since, and Secretary Kelley or Deputy Chief Kelley said this yesterday. The president is really talking about our nuclear posture. He's very interested in and has been working behind the scenes to fund the military and to do the hard work of getting us back on a good footing, and he's right to do that. I agree with that as a Republican, but I have to say that he also, I think, takes the ability to be the president and to speak provocatively among folks, even when he's not steeped in knowledge about things, and he may well have said that, and they probably did push back and say, well, Mr. President, we're limited by treaties. It's been the official policy of the United States for the last 30 years to bring down the overall
started by Ronald Reagan.
Absolutely. And so there's a learning curve for the president, but he did go back and clarify again on Hannity this week, where he said, what I really want is all of our nuclear weapons to be in tip-top shape. And you know what? Anybody who's been watching the news knows that the men and women of our nuclear forces, military, are stretched thin, that they need to be resupplied, and that whole nuclear triad is being tested, and it requires presidential leadership.
Having a nuclear deterrent is one of the things that distinguishes us from everybody else.
Hell yeah.
And so getting rid of it, like President Obama wanted to get rid of it, was actually, I thought, kind of destabilizing. But anyway, that's another topic. Theory 3. It might be a bunch of superstitious mumbo-jumbo, but then again, eternity is a long time. My Uncle Bob used to tell me that all the time in the context of organized religion, and more specifically having to do with Pascal, a famous philosopher who talked about organized religion, who was a great Catholic, and said, this might be a bunch of mumbo-jumbo, but the gamble, if you take the gamble, you might as well gamble on behalf and believe, because believers are going to win out in the end. But I was thinking about this more in terms of how people try to influence events outside their control, like the Washington Nationals. I know people who didn't go to Game 5 because they felt like they were...
People?
Or me. I know people who were wearing shirts that they wore the last 3 games that they won in the hopes that they'll somehow influence their event. I told a couple of friends, including you, John Easton, that I wasn't going to the game, and you thought I was nuts. And I had other people who came up to me and said, what do you think, that you're the center of the universe? And then I had other people thanking me for not going to the game because they were so worried that the Nationals,
Well, let's be clear. While John Feehery was stricken with superstition and was trying to do his part in the universe to help the Nats win last night, he did not deprive his wife and son the opportunity to go to the game.
Well, yeah, and listen, that's, and I think my son couldn't handle the truth. He was having a hard time with this game, and the game was a disappointment. So I was going to ask you the question, John Easton, about what good luck charms you use, And any thoughts you had on that terrible game last night?
Well, my superstition is not to be superstitious, really, and I was a while ago, a long time ago, and then I finally realized that this is insane. I mean, it really is. And last night, walking to the game, it's the beauty of living on Capitol Hill. You get to walk to Nats Park. We actually walked on a certain side of the street, thanks to one of our former guests, Meg Hauk, because that is the side of the street we walk on to win. So it's funny. I think what it really speaks to, in all seriousness, is superstitions with sports. It actually speaks to the devotion and the faith and the just how much they really believe in their team and how much they want to win. And that's the fun part of it. And I try not to get too superstitious because honestly, it's like I may not have the shirt anymore. I may not have the pants that I wore the last time we won, and I can't go through that. But it is fun, and my thoughts on Nats last night was just because I was there and very proud of our fandom, of the Washington Nationals fan base. That stadium last night was on fire. It was louder than I've ever heard it. We almost never sat the entire 5 hours of this game, and I would have liked a different result. It was excruciating, and I can't believe we didn't win another Game 5. But I'll tell you what, last night deepened our fan base even more.
I will say the irony of the superstitious thing in playing the Cubs is pretty rich, because there was a famous saying about the Billy Goat Tavern and the fact that there was a I can't even remember the long deal here where it was superstitious that somehow someone with a Billy Goat Tavern was somehow crossed and he put a hex on the Cubs. And one time during the 1969 when the Cubs were way ahead against the New York Mets, there was a black cat that crossed in front of Ron Santo, and that was some reason why the Cubs collapsed. And then there's a famous story of Steve Bartman, who caught a pop fly foul ball and got it out of the mid of some poor, I can't remember who the left fielder was, but this guy became a scapegoat for the fact that the Cubs couldn't win. And the scapegoating is a big part of superstition, Adam, and it can be very negative. But to your point, all these things that all the Nats fans were trying to do was as a way to kind of show that they are on board with them winning and that they had devotion to the team, which is what being a fan of Major League Baseball is supposed to be all about. And are there any superstitions for the Redskins? Because I know that you don't care about baseball.
No, I'm not a superstitious fellow. I was thinking about this because I knew you were going to bring it up, and I thought to myself, is there anything like this? And the only thing I would say is that, when I was a bowler for many years on a team, and I used to respond better even when I was doing well. If anybody said, "Great job, you're doing great," I'd be like, "No, just tell me I suck." The more I hear that, the less pressure I feel. But no, I'm not into Jewish mysticism or superstition. I'm just me.
You're just you. Not talking about superstition, but John Easton, do you think that Dusty Baker should be re-signed, or do you think that it's time for him to move on?
It was a good question. I'm still trying to process the outcome from last night, but I don't think that Jason Worth will be back. I've enjoyed his being on the team all these years. I think he's had a tremendous impact as a leader. Dusty Baker, I know he's a players kind of manager, and I think he's gotten a lot out of these guys. But we're just trying to find the formula here, and we've gone through a number of managers.
Well, is the rub that he just doesn't know how to manage these pitchers into the postseason?
Well, that's Maddox's job, and I think Dusty defers to the pitching coach, Mike Maddox, and as he should. But if they're really looking to shake things up after this another excruciating loss at Game 5, then no, I don't think he'll return.
And I will say, it isn't a tremendous surprise. It's a surprise to us. But the Cubs had the best record in the second half of the season. They've been pretty hot. The Nationals played them pretty tough. I think that the thing, my concern about Dusty is he didn't change up the lineup at all. I mean, Howie Kendrick, great player, didn't even play.
Yeah.
Wilmer Defoe, didn't play at all. when you had Trey Turner who batted 0 for 14 the first 14 at bats, and you need a guy who's going to get on. So there wasn't a whole lot of creativity. I like Dusty Baker. I thought that he misplayed Albers, who was pitching pretty well, took him out after 1 inning. I don't think that Scherzer should have come in. I think he was kind of browbeat into bringing Scherzer in. But I like Dusty Baker. I think he's a great American. I'm really disappointed that the Nationals didn't win.
He's a great American.
He's a great American.
I appreciate his heart. You see where I am? I appreciate him. That was my George W. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Finally, a new segment: buy, sell, or hold. Tell us the insider stock that our viewers should buy, sell, or hold. John Easton.
My stock, and I'm going to buy some McConnell. I'm going to buy some Mitch McConnell today. Why? Because I think that on tax reform, the single biggest issue for Republicans in Washington, D.C. and across the land, I think it's going to get done. And I think in part because Mitch McConnell knows how to run the Senate and he knows how to run his caucus.
Adam Belmar.
I'm going to go way out there with this one, ladies and gentlemen of the interwebs. If I'm recommending a buy, it's Arby's. They have the meats, and then now they've got more meats. They're coming out with sandwiches that are elk and venison. Hunting season is on. Buy. We have the meats.
Wow.
Didn't expect that, did you?
I'm getting kind of hungry.
I'm starving, actually. My buy is Ed Gillespie running for governor in Virginia. Ed's an old friend. I think that he has got some really good ads running in Northern Virginia that puts the Democrat Ralph Northam on the defensive, especially about MS-13. You don't want to be associated with MS-13 if you're a politician. Gillespie is doing a good job
Or
of
being weak on crime,
being
or
weak
gun
in
control
crime.
the way Northam has.
So I think that Gillespie has a strong message, and I'm going to buy Gillespie because most people inside the Beltway don't think he's got a chance. So let's talk a little bit about these things. So Arby's, when are they making these new sandwiches?
This was all the big news yesterday in the in the mainstream media, the non-fake news. Look, it's a one-day thing, I think, with the venison. It's a multi-market test for the elk. I think that people love the commercials. My grandfather was a big Arby's fan. He was from out west. I know a lot of people don't like Arby's. There's one out in Virginia that I take the kids to regularly. I think Americans are interested in this. That's why I say buy. And if you're in a market where you see the commercials and it's out there, let's go check it out. Let us know. Comment below if you get any of this new Arby's We Have the Meat sandwich. Let us know, and we might just be having them
I'd like to
here.
know. I'd like to know about it on the Facebook. That'd be great if you
Facebook.
comment on it, because I'm never going to go in Arby's. I think it's disgusting.
I'll
But
bring it to you. You want me- what?
you know what, John? I think you're right about Mitch McConnell. He's been getting a lot of grief from a lot of these conservative groups. Well, I'm not sure how conservative. I think a lot of these folks are doing this just to kind of build up their mailing list.
Sure.
And Mitch McConnell is a punching bag because he's a leader, and he's not a superstitious guy. He's very realistic, although he's also a Nats fan. But I do think they're going to get tax reform done.
Right, and I say this is where McConnell shines because, one, this is the most natural issue to Republicans, tax reform, and two, Mitch McConnell is a very good tactician. This is much more about the inside game from here on out, from here till Christmas, than anything else. It's about moves within committees and then on the floor and really managing that floor well. And I think he has the experience and the know-how to do it, and his staff does as well. So I think on a must-do piece of legislation like tax reform, I think he's the guy to get it done.
Kelley got asked specifically about whether he blames McConnell for health care reform going down, and he said he dodged the question a little bit, but in a tactful way, and said, look, it's hard to be a leader, and you've got Republicans out there who just won't come together, and it's impossible to get some folks to make those tough votes. And so he's not putting the blame on McConnell. I think it would be unwise for him to do that, especially since he's working on behalf of the administration. But that was another point of diplomacy and tact that came through in the Chiefs press conference yesterday.
Thank you all for joining us today for the Feehery podcast, brought to you by EFB Advocacy. EFB means
excellent for business.
Yeah, baby.